Good afternoon, everyone. It is wonderful to be here at CogX, and we are going to be talking this afternoon about how to bring deep tech to the world. And deep technology is often coming from deep research, from academic founders, from engineers. And so we've got a fantastic setup here in Europe. So we often sort of look at sort of the US and other geographies. And, but here in Europe, we have 5 of the 10 top universities in the world. As far as STEM subjects, 28% of students cover STEM subjects here in Europe versus around 18% in the US. So we've got a sort of great raw materials there. 43% of the world's top cited research comes from Europe. And between 2015 and 2020, 6,600 companies were spun out of universities. So fantastic raw material. However, there is still a very high failure rate. So over 70% of companies between seed and Series A typically fail. And this often isn't because the technology doesn't work. It may be because the business model doesn't work, they can't get funding, etc. So there's actually quite a lot of waste in there, and the process is still effectively being worked through, if you like, on how do we best commercialize technologies. And that's what we'll spend some time talking about this afternoon. But however, if you can get this right, there is huge value here. So last year, PitchBook did a report, and there was 189 deep tech unicorns with a value of around $670 billion. So if you can do this right, there's real value here. So I'm delighted to be able to have a couple of wonderful speakers, which will have introduced themselves in just a moment. But Cambridge, where we are all sort of based, is a fantastic hub for deep tech innovation. And so for the last sort of 30, 50 years, deep tech companies have been spinning out from ARM to a number of the sort of big sort of biotech companies as well. So it's a real hub for deep tech. And so we think that it's a great exemplar of how to sort of bring deep tech to market. So with that, I will ask Elaine to do a quick intro.
Certainly. Hi. Good afternoon. I'm Elaine Loukes, and I'm an investment director at Cambridge Enterprise Ventures. I lead on the deep tech investment side, and I started my career in early stage tech venturing actually back in 2001, interesting time, just after the dot-com crash, which probably most of you weren't born then. But I focused then on A's and beyond, but when I joined Cambridge Enterprise in 2015, I started focusing earlier on seed and pre-seed, which it's enormous fun. My background, I'm a PhD in physics, and then I trained as a chartered accountant, which is actually quite a good background for going into venture. And it is great being back, speaking to academics at the first stage, capturing that enthusiasm and looking at what can be done from their technology.
Excellent, thank you. And then on my right, we have Ian.
Afternoon, nice to meet you all. So my name's Ian, I'm a partner at Cambridge Innovation Capital, a deep tech and venture fund investing in deep tech companies focused in and connected with the Cambridge ecosystem in the UK. Currently investing out of our £225 million fund. We write checks ranging from sort of £1 to £10 million and longer over the lifetime of a company. I've obviously been working in technology and investing over the last 20 years, which means I guess I've been in a privileged position to see how the UK venture ecosystem has evolved, and it really has changed a hell of a lot over the last 10 to 20 years. So I'm looking forward to the discussion today.
Good, thank you. And then I'm Miles Kirby, I'm the CEO of Deeptech Labs, and I'm sort of sat between these guys because, as you'll discover, we've got sort of Cambridge Enterprise spinning companies out of the university. Deeptech Labs is an accelerator helping companies go between seed and Series A, building sort of the ecosystem around those founders, and then we've got CIC who's doing Series A and later. So we've got kind of an interesting sort of set of folks to sort of talk us through from sort of the very beginning through to hopefully the large expansion stage. So with that, maybe what I'll do is, if you could tell us a little bit about, right from the beginning. So you've got these great academics, and they're in a sort of a darkened lab doing something really interesting, and they think, I might like to do a startup. So what happens next?
Okay, well, I think I probably need to give a bit of a background of Cambridge Enterprise and what Cambridge Enterprise does, because there's several strands to it. We're a wholly owned subsidiary of the University of Cambridge, and Cambridge Enterprise as a whole is there to help commercialise technology emerging from the university. Now, there's several business units, but the two that are most relevant are tech transfer, and everybody's heard of tech transfer offices. But there's also the investment arm, which is Cambridge Enterprise Ventures, and that's where I sit. So in terms of where do you start, often our deals come in through the tech transfer team. So academics might approach our tech transfer team and say, I've got this technology, I think I can patent it, I think it can do this. So the tech transfer team will spend some time looking at that, evaluating, actually, is it something unique? What stage is it at? What's its TRL level? How much? Is it really pretty early? And they'll also look at what is the commercialization opportunity? Is it a license or is it a spin-out? And they can't make the decision on it's a spin-out. They can strongly steer towards licensing, as a lot of stuff is licensing. But if it's something that the inventor really wants to push to a spin-out, they'll send them to our team. So what I get is usually my first meeting is with people with some technology, and sometimes, but not always, with a vision, because sometimes people will say, I've got this and I think it can do that. And because I focus on the physical sciences deep tech side, what you often get is technology that's an answer, but actually what's the question you're asking of that technology? So our team will spend time looking at the people, because you need drive to do this. It's a really, really hard process to take an idea. And I think it's often underestimated just how brutal the process can be. But we look at the people, and quite often we need to help bring in people. We look at the business plan. What is this a scalable business? Because what we're trying to achieve within the ventures team is we want to create spin-outs that are phenomenally successful, that will be generating great returns for the investors, which include us, because we do invest, but will also have a huge positive societal impact as well. So we've got the double bottom line of financial return and impact. So making sure that our companies, if we want to achieve that, we need to make sure we are only spinning out and investing. It's not just spinning out and hoping that Ian will come along or Miles will come along. We put our money where our mouth is. We invest the university's money. We have to make sure we're investing something that other investors are going to say, this looks great. And I think we do that pretty well, because our spin-outs have actually gone on to raise, to date, it's £3.1 billion, which is a huge amount to have raised. And I think in the context of this discussion, what's really important is that it's not just we create a spin it out, say, hey, market, have a look at this. You have to build, and you can't build alone. You have to build within an ecosystem, and I think Cambridge is a fantastic ecosystem. So I'm talking to Miles a lot, I'm talking to Ian a lot, I'm talking to the other investors, and that ecosystem is really, really critical. So I'm sorry, I've covered quite a bit there, but that's how it starts.
That's great. And so then when we sort of look at as you were kind of saying, this is a team sport, right? So different players come in, the existing sort of early investors continue to support the company, new investors come in, and the needs of the company changes somewhat over time. So we, with me sitting in the middle here, so there's a number of companies that Cambridge Enterprise has funded, has got started. They've gone gone from a raw technology, and where we come in is we want to see the technology is starting to work, some existence proof. And then the game changes somewhat. So instead of at the early seed stage, you're saying, I've got this great technology, one example, quantum interconnect, we think this will be great. We want to see some early proof points that's going to work. And then we've got a little bit of a shift where it's like, okay, technology is working, the idea and the potential is there, how do we now actually build a business, right? So how do we work out which market do we go after? What business model should we use? And of course, with a lot of these new technologies, there isn't necessarily an established model. You may be displacing someone else. There's also, you can leave massive amounts of money on the table if you're just doing a software license, but yet you're discovering a brand new material with billions of revenue behind it. So what we do is we invest in companies at Deeptech Labs, and we bring them through a 10-week accelerator program. And so we bring this ecosystem together. So experts from around the world who have already built deep tech companies, who've got the scars, who've got the experience, who've got the network, to be able to help these companies to work that out. And often the academics and engineers are brilliant in their field, but they may not have run a company before. Most likely they haven't. We do have some repeat entrepreneurs, but most of them are first-time entrepreneurs. So we think it's really important to bring this whole ecosystem around these companies to ensure they're successful. So we've got 400 experts that we bring in to talk to them and advise them, work one-to-one with them, and then we do a demo day at the end with, last time we had over 350 people came along, over 200 investors, to expose those companies to the larger ecosystem. So effectively, we've got the academic founders of, I think I've got something interesting, get started, get funded, then sort of come through our program, so going between sort of pre-seed, seed, getting ready for Series A, and then Ian comes in. So maybe, Ian, you can talk about what you guys do.
Yeah, thank you, Miles. So it's no surprise that for a deep tech company, a Series A round looks completely different compared to an enterprise SaaS company or consumer internet startup. I mean, I think that's a given. But how do you define that? What is so different? And for me, it really is the transition from sort of a technology through to a product. And exactly, it's not even the case of that product being purchased by multiple customers. Like I say, that's probably coming a bit further down the line. But it's how that transition from a technology to a product has been made. Because if it's just been done by a group of very smart technology-based founders in a room locked in a basement somewhere, it really isn't the transition from a technology to a product. That's just, that's something else. What really we're looking for is that the team have really engaged with, spoke to, and listened to customers to make that transition, and hopefully iterated on that, such that the technology can move to a product. Because all too often, that productization step is either lost or just done in a sort of academic way, without, as early as possible, getting out there and speaking to customers, and being very open that this thing, the product maybe even not be built yet, but that's the direction. So that's really the key thing for us that we're looking for. And there's obviously everything else that we're looking for across the team, but that transition from technology to product, done in a way listening to customers, is really, really key.
And I think there's some great examples there of one company that we've worked with together who said, we're going to go here, and we start talking to customers, and there's kind of a product halfway to that end product, and customers say they want that now, and they're going to pay for it. And it's a simple, okay, great, that's fantastic feedback. Let's go after that, right? I mean, it's not quite as straightforward. There's a lot of considerations around that. But I think that feedback from the market is really critical. And I think that actually is where a huge number of companies fail. Is, again, it's not the technology. It's about finding the right market. And then maybe, when we talk about, moving from this kind of, academic and engineering, building the best widget, to sort of, if we build it, they will come, to, well, actually, that's not going to be the case. We need to figure out, what are the right markets. So interesting to talk. We were talking sort of, in the back there just a little bit about this. Is how do you get the right talent in? And I think, when you look at the US, which is often sort of taken as a poster child for innovation, the very best and the brightest coming out of universities are going into sort of the entrepreneurial space. Historically, folks in Europe were maybe more on the finance side or consulting side. I think that's starting to change. But would love to kind of get your opinion. How do we bring the right people in? Are the people out there? Is this building the ecosystem? I mean, how do you think about this?
I think absolutely people are critical. And as you say, you've got maybe the academic, more technical inventors and the founders. And yes, maybe they don't have the business side, but they've got the passion. And I think it's actually, you've got to bring in somebody who can work with that passion. You've got to understand what it takes to spin a company out. So I think where we are behind in the US is having, if you go and take a job in the Valley, you're probably going to be reasonably relaxed if you shift your entire family over there, that if that job doesn't work out, there are plenty other ones. It's not the situation, it's not the same situation in the UK. So Cambridge, I think, is probably the leading place. I know that others will maybe dispute that. But we have, obviously, you've got the university as the base. We've got several major companies that are there now. You need these companies, you need all the startups, so you've got access to the talent, but you need to encourage people that have been there and done that, ideally with a startup, because going from a successful massive company to a startup is a very much underestimated how difficult that is. So I think if you have an ecosystem where people, there's a buzz about the place, there's lots of opportunities, there's lots of talking. I mean, Cambridge is just all about network of networks. You go and you have a chat with someone and say, oh, you should chat to someone else. So I think building that out, now logistically, Cambridge has a huge issue with traffic and housing, etc. But I think if nowhere is going to be the next Silicon Valley, but I think we can have somewhere that emulates it to a large extent and really encourages, just attracts people in, because it's that experience that is really, really needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, that whole ecosystem of sort of startups, funding, advisors, space, housing, roads, etc., bicycles. So what's interesting, though, I mean, obviously in the early stages, I mean, often I think sort of, a CEO may be good for a certain period, and then sometimes, for the next phase, a different CEO might be the right person. Maybe the academic becomes a CTO or chief scientific officer, and probably this is sort of, more of a crux, of where you are, because you are very much looking for sort of, the company has found those commercial opportunities. So is that something that, how do you think about that and bringing the right talent around, these companies? And do you feel that there's a different kind of CEO required at Series A than at kind of pre-seed and seed?
I think, look, we'll back and work with founders, and if they're capable of going all the way through, some can, some can't, some don't want to, some do. So I think, if founders are willing to learn, and it's clearly a very, very different job being a pre-seed or a seed founder to a sort of Series B, Series C founder, raising hundreds of millions of dollars and deploying that capital. So, if founders are capable of doing that, we'll work with them to do that. Key for us, though, is that first CEO, changing a CEO between sort of seed and Series A is very, very, very hard. And so ideally, the same CEO will take the business up through that startup phase, and then if it's the right time to change for the scale-up phase, I think that's fine. But yeah, changing the CEO at that early stage is a challenging. So that initial evangelist needs to be the person who can take it through and have that. I mean, we tend to call it sort of entrepreneurial muscle. Just as you said, Elaine, it's a challenging process through those early years, trying to make the evolution from technology to product and speaking to customers, and so having that muscle. So that's the most important thing. I mean, I think when it comes to talent in the UK ecosystem, and so like I said, we look at startups and we look at scale-ups, and I think we've got plenty of examples now for scale-ups where we've got phenomenal talent from all the way around the world coming to join our businesses that are like I say, well capitalized. And so there, I'm not saying there's not more to be done, but I think our companies in the UK with phenomenal technology can attract phenomenal talent at the later stage to help them scale and quite frankly be massive companies. Where there clearly is still a challenge is at that earlier stage, and I think, as you said, the ecosystem, the network, and ways of doing that. I think one aspect for me that I think has changed a lot in the last 10 years is the prevalence of repeat entrepreneurs in the UK. So I think 10 years ago, I think founders often used to start a business and they were sort of one and done, and then moved on. Whereas now we're seeing them coming back and starting multiple businesses. I think one of our founders in our companies, I think, is fifth or sixth startup, and so. And that kind of experience is really hugely attractive to get other people and amazing talent to join some of these early companies. So I think that for me is not only are those people experienced, but also it's a really attractive for people then to try and join those companies when they see that experience and see that as success, quite frankly.
And I think on this ecosystem and these kind of repeat entrepreneurs, I spent 20 years in California. I came back in 2012 to the UK, and it was really quite interesting to kind of see the ecosystem in the UK versus the US. And I think in the last now 11 years, there's been a dramatic sort of uptick in the activity of the ecosystem, on the sophistication. I think seeing serial entrepreneurs come back, and also this really collaborative environment. And I think that's what you need. And often, we talk about the CEO, but also having sort of the right board, having the right chairman as well. And a really good chairman can be game-changing as well, to be able to help to sort of coach that entrepreneur as they come through. So, I think as a larger ecosystem, it's something you really need to focus on, is how do we draw more of these great people back in to help serve the next generation of entrepreneurs. And I think one thing that we found at Deeptech Labs is, because we're asking people to volunteer to come talk to our companies, and when we got started, I was quite worried. Are people just going to say, hey, look, I'm running a huge business, I'm too busy, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. But actually what we found is a huge number of people are saying, I wish I'd got this support when I was doing my startup. I've made so many mistakes, I've learned so much, and I would love to be able to give back and help. And plus also, actually, what we find is sometimes the folks that are running these big businesses that are more mature, they really miss that early stage, that excitement of, okay, we've got a new technology, how might we take it to market, versus how do we kind of turn the handle on this really big business.
If I could just add, because I think this is where the University of Cambridge really does it differently, is you're absolutely right. It is an enormous challenge to go from, hey, I've got an idea, to a successfully funded spin out, that Ian says this is great. And what effectively we're doing is we're working, I will talk to investors, for the founders for 2 or 3 years before we actually say, right, okay, you've been developing, you've got more grant funding, your TRL level is higher, you've got a better idea of what you're doing. And that time is so important. And some people come in and say, yes, we'll work with you, we'll take some sweat equity and we'll build this together. And immediately you've got dilution, you've got somebody who's basically there for the money. So I think that part of it, I would like to say, I think that part is so important, because it takes time, and not rushing in and maybe going down the wrong direction, to be able to see where the market.
Very iterative process, right? It's a learning process.
It is.
Yeah. Good. So we're down to the last couple of minutes. So I thought what I would do as we start to kind of get towards wrapping up the session is, this is an interesting area, because there is no one solution that magically works. We're still sort of evolving this ecosystem and this whole model of spinning technology out. So I'd love to hear maybe Ian first on this one. Is there one thing, or is there, what would you do to be able to sort of ensure much higher success rate for this kind of conversion of sort of raw ideas into real businesses that can have some major societal change?
So I think for us, it would be getting really strong commercial product and sales expertise into the business early enough, because that, like I say, that really helps with those customer conversations. It's sort of listening to. A lot of people can talk to customers. It's that rare breed that can then listen to actually say what the customer wants, and then go back and put an extra wheel on or whatever.
And even then synthesize it into something that actually works, that they would buy. Yeah.
So that listening skill set is so valuable. And so if we could work out how to get more of that talent into our companies earlier, it would be a lot better than sort of maybe going down a route and then finding out further down the line that it's not the right commercial approach.
Elaine, what about you? What do you think?
Well, I think you need to find more sources of non-dilutive funding in the early stages, so that you could. Companies very rarely go from A to B. They are in a straight line. They'll go in a zigzag, and that costs a lot more money. And it's right they go in a zigzag, because that's you finding out what the market wants. So I would say getting that funded is from grant funding as much as possible, because that will then allow you to have a technology that will then, and to a stage of development which will allow you to draw in that talent, because that's quite hard, bringing in the talent before you've got the product ready or you can really see what the visibility out to market is. So it's sort of bottom up to attract the talent that's going to then take it.
Thank you. And then I think from my side, I think it's really around building this ecosystem and making sure that you've got the capital, you've got the entrepreneurs, you've got the whole team that can go around them, this support community, and also these clusters, as you were saying, where an entrepreneur can take that risk and get started. And I think what's hugely exciting here, I think that as you heard me say at the beginning, I think Europe is incredibly well positioned to be sort of the deep tech sort of center of the world, the engine room, if you like, of deep tech. And I think we're really starting to ramp up. I think the model isn't proven yet, and we're still sort of tweaking and improving it, but there's just a huge, huge opportunity here. I think together we can really sort of drive massive societal change, value to our ecosystem. So a really exciting time. So with that, I'll draw this session to a close. I would like to say a huge thanks to our speakers. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you to the audience for listening. And we will let you move on to the rest of your day. Thank you so much for joining us.